He said, "Get in here as quick as you can. We need you badly. We want you to go to work for us." So I left the hotel business and went into Pocatello. The first day I went to work for him was the 15th of August, and I think it was 1924. And I worked for about 18 months for them. And I was all over the country, wherever they had stores, far away as Butte, Montana. And the 6th of November, I went back to Jerome and was put in charge of the store in 1924. Yeah, for the old Skaggs stores. And of course, I didn't have much to do around there in Jerome for a while, and I got acquainted with Stella, and we got married in September, Labor Day, 1926.
Where did you meet her?
I don't know whether I met her at a dance hall or dance or not. I saw her, and I told this kid that I was running around her, I said, "I like that girl. I like the looks of that girl. I'd like to get acquainted with her." And he went and told her. And Stella said, "Well, if he wants to meet me, have him come and meet me." And I started going with her a few days in June in 1926. And our first full day was July the 4th that we spent in Twin Falls, 4th of July of 1926. And then we started going together to study. And I was working hard as I could and trying to keep up the social activities with her in the evening. I just about run out.
What did you like particularly about her? How did she attract you? What were some of the things you
she was a
thought?
wonderful girl. Beautiful girl. Very clean girl. Girls of that felt like you could respect her. Many of the girls in those days were just like the girls are today. They're ruthless and didn't care much what they did, just so they'd have a good time. But Stella and I clicked right on the start. And I liked her and she liked me.
How long you been married now?
Well, it'll be 59 years Labor Day.
Think you'll keep her then?
Huh?
Think you'll keep her then? How many children have you had?
Well, we had 4 boys, I guess.
Could you tell us their names?
Well, the first one was born the 12th of October, 1927, and we called him William Lawrence Walker, Jr. He goes by the name of Larry. The next boy was born on the 22nd of July, 1929, and we called him Jackie Dean Walker. He goes by the name of Jack Walker. The next boy was born the 22nd of September, 1936, and his name is Richard Walker, Richard Allen Walker. Then the 4th boy was born the 12th of October, 1939, in Missoula, Montana, and we called him Ronald Walker. So there's 4 boys in our family.
And he goes by the name of Ron.
And he goes by the name of Ron.
So now one of them go by what you named him. Tell us a little bit about what you did in most of your lifetime. You were in the grocery business for quite a few years, and then you spent some years in the drug business.
Well, I spent 22 years, I think, with Safeway, or the old Skaggs United, before I severed relations with them.
You were 22 years with them?
I think it's 22 years, just about 22 years. I put in my resignation in October 1941.
So then what did you after you
And I wasn't relieved of the responsibility until April 1st, 1942. And then after that, I went to train with L.S.'s Skaggs drugstore business. Started in Butte, Montana. I was in Butte for quite a little while, and then they were opening up the Ogden store. So L.S. wanted me to come down and help get that store opened up. And I was with him until, I guess, about July. And then I went back to Missoula, Montana, and got ready to move to Cedar Rapids, Iowa. And we left Missoula, Montana, August 15th, 1942, to go back to Cedar Rapids to open up a Osco drug store for L.L. Skaggs.
Why did you pick Cedar Rapids?
That was the store that they'd opened up and got the lease for me. Paul Stratton had come out and asked me if I'd accept the job with him. And I told him I would because I was having this trouble with Safeway. They were closing all the districts just before the war. They closed 25 districts, and I happened to be, my district was divided up between Butte, Montana and Great Falls. And they wanted me to go back in the grocery, run a store for them, and I wouldn't take it. So I turned in my resignation in October, and I wasn't relieved until the 1st of April. And I started training in LS's Payless drugs to get some experience. And then I went back to Stella and I and our family moved to Cedar Rapids, Iowa, the 15th of August, 1941. 42. And we were back there about 12 years. We left there on April 15th, 1954. And moved to Bakersfield, California.
When you were in Bakersfield, you worked with your brother in the oil business that you told us about a few minutes ago.
Well, we had a company organized when I got back there. That they misrepresented it to me. I was supposed to be his partner, but they got back there. They want to organize it into a company and corporation and take Babe's wife's brother into it and form a corporation. We called it Walker Salvage and Trucking Company. And we had vacuum trucks and oil trucks that we cleaned into the tanks for the oil companies and pumped this oil out of the sumps and took the town and heated it and treated it and cleaned it and sold it back to the refinery. Shell Refinery bought the oil from us.
Were you happy working in that position?
Seemed to, most of the time. Things were run along pretty good.
Now, one of the things that happened to you that was pretty eventful when you were back in Iowa was that you joined the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Could you tell us why you did that?
Oh, I think I was... What started me more than anything else was taking the Reader's Digest, or National Geographic. And I'd read that thing from pretty close from cover to cover. And it had articles in this, half the one that I read, telling about this civilization that they'd been uncovering in Central America and South America and Mexico, about the civilizations that they were uncovering, and temples and things down there that they'd uncovered. And that tied in with the Book of Mormon a good deal. And I moved. Stella and I think our family all went to North Dakota to visit Larry when he was being married, or about the time he was married, I guess the time he was being married. And he got up and went to work, and he left the Book of Mormon, Ancient America and the Book of Mormon by Milton R. Hunter on his desk. And I picked it up and I read 93 pages while he was out that morning. And it tied in with this article I got out of the National Geographic. And then I began to read the Book of Mormon after that. the more I read it, it just tied in with it. I become more interested. But all the time, Stella was working on me. And you kids would go to school or going to Sunday school and church, and I'd go with you. I wasn't particularly too much interested, but it all just dropped into place, I think, seemed like.
Well, would you say that you have a testimony of it today?
I suppose I have a better testimony than most people do have testimony of church today. I don't think many have got a stronger testimony than I have.
Now, you spent some time as the president of the High Priest Quorum when that was not a function of the stake presidency, and you've also served some stake missions, 2 stake missions as I recall, and then you and Mother served a full-time mission for the church.
I did the second state mission. I didn't do much. I was assigned, but they finally released me before I went on the full-time mission. But they wanted me to go out and do the work for these new missionaries, do the work for them, and I wasn't interested. I just told them I wasn't anxious to do that kind of work. I'd gone through that too many times.
What do you mean by do the work for them? You mean proselyting?
Well, they wanted me to do the proselyting, make the contacts for them and do everything.
Find people for them to teach?
And I just didn't go for it.
I see. Is there anything that you'd like to tell us about how you feel about the Latter-day Saint Church since you've been a missionary? Or have you said pretty much all you want to say about that?
Well, without a doubt, it's the greatest thing that's ever happened to civilization. I think since the time of Christ. I don't think that there's been a greater prophet in the world today. It couldn't have been a greater prophet. And he got his connection directly from the Lord.
Who's that you're talking about?
I'm talking about Joseph Smith.
I see. Then you have a belief in his teachings and in the Book of Mormon that he brought forth?
Couldn't have been anything. It couldn't have been anything different. It couldn't have been anything different than what it's supposed to be.
You know, if you were going to talk to some people who are not yet born, who would be your great-great-great-grandchildren, what advice would you give them?
Study the Book of Mormon and get themselves converted.
Any other advice that maybe was non-religious?
Well, I'm sure if they would attend the meetings and follow the teachings and their testimony, that they couldn't help but be converted, because it's true, it's absolutely true as can possibly be. And if you follow the teachings that's been outlined to us, you'll be blessed and blessed abundantly. And the closer you live to the Lord and these teachings, the more you can expect to receive the benefits from it.
Do you have any other advice to give, like education or anything like that?
Well, I think anybody, just like I was talking to Larry since I come here, and Larry's talking about going to Provo.
Your grandson.
And I told him I didn't think he could make it a better choice, because it's one of the greatest one of the church schools in the whole world. And they'll build a testimony there, and not only that, but those people, after they graduated, they're outstanding. They're the first people to pick in all these colleges for responsible jobs. I told him that.
Well, we've been visiting this afternoon, August 27th, 1985, with William Lawrence Walker Sr. And is there anything else you want to say? You're in what year now? You're in your...
Keep up the good work.
You're in your 85th year?
Yeah, I'm 85 years old.
And you're living in Salt Lake City.
Salt Lake City, and I have a lovely apartment. I have a beautiful wife, and we're getting along real well. Our family couldn't be blessed more than we've been blessed.
Well, thank you very much for visiting with us this afternoon. This is August the 28th, 1985, and we're talking to Estella Marie Stoddard Walker. And she is my mother, and she's here visiting with me in Eugene, Oregon. So when I visit with her, I'll call her Mother. Thinking back to the very beginning in your life, you grew up in Idaho. Would you tell us what cities you lived in, what communities you were in?
Well, I was born in Fremont County, Parker, Idaho.
Now, you told me something about a midwife attended your mother. Grandma Crapo, you said?
Grandma Crapo, and I did find out her name, but I have it in the history, and I don't remember now what she said, what Alec said it was. He knew them very well.
Your folks were living there in, what was it?
They were living on a ranch that belonged to a Mr. Harshberger.
Now, what city was that near? The biggest city?
Parker.
Parker?
That was near St. Anthony.
Near St. Anthony. Was the hospital in St. Anthony, or was it Parker?
They had no hospitals. The delivery was home delivery.
Oh, I see.
She was a midwife.
Mm-hmm.
And she came to the home, and she delivered my brother and myself and my sister, all three of us.
Your grandmother Coffin was a midwife. So that was something that was a very honorable profession in those days.
Well, very, because they didn't have a lot of doctors that could run around the places. They couldn't cover all the distances they had to go.
Sure.
And the women did it.
Well, Grandma Sophronia, she be your great-grandmother?
No,
Sophronia?
she was my grandmother.
She was your grandmother.
My
Grandmother.
mother's mother.
Yeah, your grandmother, she used to get up in the middle of the night and get her buggy hitched up and go out and take care of the women if she needed to.
That's right.
Performed whatever little medicine she had in those days.
That's right.
Well, tell me a little bit about your family. You have quite a few brothers and sisters. How many all told?
There was 13 of us all together. 4 girls and 9 boys.
And how many of them are still living today?
8.
Okay.
Still living.
Your dad spent most of his life in the farming trade.
Right.
Was it in cattle, or what did he do mostly?
Well, it was some of everything. Dry farming, irrigated farming, and cattle feeding, and things like that.
I remember you taking me out there to see him when I was not any older than about 10. And he turned to me and he said, don't you do dry farming back in Iowa? And I never heard the phrase dry farming before, and I said to him, Grandpa, I think it's you people that do dry farming. We have 40 inches of rain in Iowa. And he started laughing. I just was never familiar with that phrase dry farming until later. I knew then what they meant by it. They meant irrigating when they opposed to just rainfall, which is what they call dry farming.
At one time, Papa taught for a while at the Idaho State Reform School.
Did he?
There was their instructor, short of an instructor, and they asked him to come and teach at the Reform School. And he was, I don't know how long he taught there, but he taught for a while.
Well, you told me one time that he was involved not only in the Grange, but also he was one of the early, both he and your mother were involved in Grange, but he was involved in, what was it, Meadow Gold Milk or Creamery, or what was it?
Challenge Creamery.
Challenge Creamery. I think they later were bought out by Meadow Gold.
I don't know whether...
But he was on the board of directors, wasn't he?
Yes, and after he was not on the board of directors, he was a envoy at large.
I see.
He went to all they sent him out to the different conventions.
Was it kind of a cooperative, so all the farmers
were...
were...
cooperative.
I see. He lived most of his life around Downey and Twin and Jerome and those places.
Right. I think he was born in Richmond, Utah.
I see.
And then they moved up there into Downey and around there. And it was custom in those days for the old folks to have a farm, and the boys all lived out around. And in fact, that's the way the little towns were built. It'd have the church and the school was the central activity of the group, and then the farmers all had their homes right around the church, and then their farms were out laying around about.
Grandpa had quite a few community things. He, as we mentioned, he worked in the Grange. He also had some church experience.
He didn't work in the Grange until later
I
because they
see.
didn't have a Grange in those days.
Is that fairly new thing?
Well, they had none around Downey, so I didn't know anything about it. We never heard of it until Sam and I believe was the first that they started working in the Grange. Tom and Leon worked in the Grange in Twin Falls, but I don't think Papa did. I don't remember it.
Well, he was involved. Didn't you tell me he had some scouting, that he worked in scouting some when he was young?
He did.
And then he was counselor in the bishopric for 8 years, and bishop.
He was bishop for 8 years.
He was counselor some more years than that, wasn't
Yes,
he?
and
10 or
then he
12
was-
years?
And then when we moved to Twin Falls, he was counselor in the bishopric there.
Oh, was he?
And then he went into the High Council.
And I remember he served in the High Council for some period of time, didn't he? If you were going to characterize your dad for people who have never had a chance to meet him, how would you describe him?
Papa was very gentle. He could persuade. He didn't boss. It would have been better if our family had been turned around. I hope Mama never, none of the rest of them hear this. But if Papa had been the mama and Mama had been the papa, we'd have been better off because she could have run the ranch with a iron hand and she'd have got things done. There wouldn't have been any dilly-dallying. Papa was more inclined to stop and scratch his head and lean back against the fence and talk for an hour when he should have been working. And, and that used to irritate Mama no end. And but he was gentle with us kids. He wouldn't scold us, and if we got a problem or anything, that we never would go to either one of our parents for the problem. But if he sensed a problem, he'd feel it out, you know, and kind of talk to you about it.
What was grandfather's full name?
William Henry Stoddard.
And he was not called that by his friends, though.
He was called Hen.
Hen. I know your mother called him Hen.
Kitten Hen.
And your mother was Catherine.
Coffin.
Did she have a middle name? I don't remember
No,
a middle name.
She did.
But grandfather called her Kit.
Kitten Hen.
Okay. What was Grandma like? Now, I saw her 4 or 5 times when she came to visit you, and she was always delightful. I remember that she used to do a lot of needlepoint, and not so much needlepoint, but crocheting, and she did she do knitting and things like that?
No, just crocheting.
Okay.
She didn't do any embroidery work. She did a lot of mending. She
Yeah.
could mend plenty of socks and things. She didn't do any sewing either.
What did she like to do when she was a young woman? Did you tell me she worked in some of the auxiliaries in the church?
I don't know how young she worked in the auxiliary of the church. She worked in the church. She worked as a Relief Society visiting teacher, and I don't know whether she was ever a counselor in the presidency or not. But she did work in the Mutual.
Now, you told me that she used to play the organ.
Well, she didn't play the organ. She chorded on the organ. You know, when the violinist would play, her cousin was a violinist, Jasper Barger, and she chorded the organ for Jasper for the Saturday night dances when she was young.
Okay.
And then in those days there wasn't much employment, you know, for young girls. I think she graduated from grade school. I don't think Papa did. But
She was proud of the fact that she graduated from grade school.
So she had no skill other than working, and she worked as a domestic for $1 a week.
For the neighbors in the area?
Some in Pocatello. She worked some in Pocatello, and I don't know where else.
Where'd she meet your dad?
I wouldn't know whether it must have been church or social affairs. I never asked, so I never knew.
Well, I remember her saying, I think it was in Pocatello she met him, wasn't it?
Oh, I think it must have been Downey.
Okay.
It may have been where they went to dances, you know, because she used to live out at Cambridge. That's where she was raised, is out at Cambridge. And the Stoddards lived up at Grand Ward, which was a branch of Downey, about 9 miles north or somewhere from Downey.
Are there any of the Coffins that are still living that you know about at all, that were your mother's people?
I imagine there's quite a few of them living, but I don't know who they are.
When I was back in Downey area, I talked to a bishop that was living in an older man, and apparently there was only one coffin left, and he hadn't graced the church with his presence in many years.
I don't know which one that could have been.
I just wondered if you knew of any.
No, because Uncle Frank that lived in Canada is dead, and Uncle Parl is dead, and Uncle Jeff is dead, and Uncle Tom's dead, and I don't know if there's any of them. There's bound to be their children and
Sure.
grandchildren, but I don't think any of the direct brothers or sisters are living.
What other
all the girls are dead.
what other sisters did your grandmother, or my grandmother, your mother have?
She had Aunt May and Aunt Martha and Aunt Neve, Geneva,
I see. And Par was Parley.
and that was the part.
And what about your dad's relatives? Did he have quite a few brothers and sisters?
Counting the entire family, I believe it was either 12 or 13. There was some that didn't live that died in infancy, and I'd have to count them.
I see.
But
Now, when you were pretty little, you went to stay with your grandfather and grandmother Stoddard,
right,
and you've always spoke fondly of that experience. You enjoyed living with them, didn't you?
yes, my grandmother was a very, very dignified, very precise lady.
What was her maiden name?
Bowman.
She was the Bowman. I see.
She's,
Where did the Bowmans come from? Were they from
Hannah
England?
Elizabeth Bowman.
Were they from England? You don't remember. Okay.
I don't know.
Anyway, what was your grandfather like, Brother Stoddard?
Well, he was just a dry farmer, and he was very quiet and austere in his talk. He never, I can't remember him ever saying very much or ever being very pleasant with around us, any of us kids.
Did he do anything in the church that was notable?
He must have, but I don't know anything about
You were
him.
pretty little then.
I was too little to know, and
They
I'm
all
sure.
did they go to church every Sunday with you?
Heavens, yes. Oh, yes. Very much so.
You know, you used to tell me stories when I was little about some of your relatives, particularly one about, I think he was a Stoddard who helped to lay the railroad